All right, family. We black again with the general. Y'all already know what time it is, man. We're gonna be talking about Kemet and the Olmecs, the mysterious connection they never taught you. Yeah, this is for the elite. Come on in, Bill, with the general family. It's necessary that we talk about this subject because our peoples is, they in I guess you call a phase where the studies of Black Americans is very pronounced right now, and a lot of people got a lot of different ideologies about our origins in the Americas. You got the Aboriginals to say you got the Moorish, you got all kind of shit, and but but all of them seem to be discrediting, you know, African, influence, in a very serious way. It's somehow, that we are different here and that somehow that we evolved totally in a different manner that uh any other black people on. What the hell is all this from ancient Egypt then over here? You know, what is this? How is it possible that it could be so simple for people to dismiss Africa when some of the most advanced technology as far as civilization in the Americas is a mirror image of what was going on in Egypt? No different than you look in the United States. You can look at most nations today. The manifestation of where it's at today is Western. No, I'm just saying what it is. When you look at downtowns, the first downtowns in the world was the United, when we talking about the modern downtown was America, was Chicago and New York. These are the first modern downtowns, and every other, I don't care where you look at today, even if they didn't surpass the Chinese, but that's okay. That's where they got it from. And so we can't, when you get to level of civilization advance and the similarity, and it's not one similarity, you know, it's not one similarity. It's literally hundreds of similarities. And that's when it loses the whether it was probable or it was most definitely reality. Not just that it was probable, it happened, you know? And so nobody wants to say that African was doing nothing, no way, because that's going against what been explained to the world that we was not a part of civilization. So, uh, this is another thing that when you start talking, you see these little tois, Olmec tois. Where at in the world is you gonna find little twa like that? Those are not midgets. Those are twa. You know, the limbs is proportion to the body. It's proportion. Those are twa. You know, and so where at do you find twa other than Africa? You got some in Asia too. But them African. They're, people don't want to say African, but they, in Asia, they in Asia, and it was, and when you start reading these books, they get to talking about the little Twa, the little Negrito all around the world. They were some of the first peoples that populated all around the world. And how did they get? So if you got the Twa, if any Twa over here, you see any Twa in the America, but those that got an African face. Even the Twa got an African face. So they got an African face. So where did they come from? We have to ask ourselves that question. And so, that's holding up the heavens. Even the symbol of holding up the heaven. I have some other ones where you see Shu. You can go into Asia. You see the Nagas holding up the heavens. You go into Egypt. They also holding up the heavens. And so this is a very symbolic, has a very symbolic meaning. And so you see here the Twa, and then you can go into Asia. You see, and they holding up the heavens. Look, and they Twa too now. Look at that. So you got the Negrito in Asia and in Africa. Okay, so explain to me, how do you see these advanced symbolisms all over the world like that? So when I show it here, I didn't got so to the point where I show it in three, four, five different, civilizations at one time. You know, you can see it, in three, four, five different civilizations at one time. This is not no coincidence. This is a global unified phenomenon, okay, that you can see all over. And the concept is holding up the heavens. And what's crazy, do you know even the Vikings got a concept of four dwarves holding up the heavens? Do y'all know that? That the Vikings also got the same mythology? We gotta stop this. We gotta stop this, man. These people trying to talk us up out of our, our global prowess. We mastered the globe. We ain't stuck in no damn corner or nothing. We mastered the globe. But we first mastered, Africa. And then we came out of Africa, and then we went into Asia first. We went into South Asia, moving from west to east. And we mastered the Indian Ocean first. But that was the first ocean that we mastered, was the Indian Ocean, which really is the Kushite Ocean. Ain't no damn Indian, the Kushite Ocean. And so that was the first, and all along that peripheral of the Kush, and I'll just say India so you don't lose your what is it I'm looking for? Orientation. So that you don't lose your orientation. So, they had dominated all the landmass on that Indian Ocean, all the way from India to Africa, all through that was Kushite. All of that. All of it through the south, that whole ocean was dominated by the Kushite people. And so that's why you see so much so many similarities, because they were unified. And though they did have different, they had uniqueness, but on top of the uniqueness, it was so many unified customs and customs and traditions that was the same, which made them, one people, global people in that respect. Meaning, if you left Egypt or Kush and or Sudan and you went into India, you would basically, it is other is uniqueness, but you would receive the same Kushite, hospitality. You will be protected as, a Kushite, no matter where you came from. They didn't have the prejudice like that. So that's the only way you could spread knowledge like this. You have to be open, and as one people, and they respected the fact that they had, and that was okay. They loved it. They still traded with one another. You would find all type of products and statues from Egypt and India, and a lot of Indian products in Ethiopia and all of that. They traded, so it was a global economy already in existence, even back then, And another one of the highly you know, popular deities in Mexico that was also very popular in Egypt was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. This is where you get the dragon from. The dragon is the feathered serpent. That's what it became when it went into the east. And I'll show you very, with you know, is undeniable evidence that these are the same concepts that have moved into various parts of the earth where our peoples was. And yes, it became unique, but oh how it was this, based on the same spirituality. Our peoples, when cosmic law is in play, you ain't about to just make up a whole lot of stuff. You still got to abide by cosmic law. And so, the pineal gland and it connected to the sun, and all of this will you that's why that's another thing that you see. There's another unified concept, that you see all around the globe was the third eye. And they put it right there on the middle of the forehead to let you know that's exactly what it was. And so let me see, where's Quetzalcoatl at? Okay. Where's Quetzalcoatl at? Okay. Well, here go one. Here you go right here. So you see Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent to the left, and then you see the Wajet, the serpent goddess Lower Kemet. Of Lower Kemet, you see the crown of Lower Kemet on her head. And then you got the anthropomorphic symbolism of Quetzalcoatl. And you see right there but Quetzalcoatl was Olmec, you know, the Aztecs and the Mayans, I think and they call him Kukan, or something like that. But Quetzalcoatl was the original serpent god of the Olmecs. That's unique. And the jaguar. That's Olmec. The jaguar, Quetzalcoatl, that's uh uh that's Olmeca. Period. Now, another thing about it, and when you come here and you see this is the what is the serpent mound in the Americas. You see, and you see the serpent, right? And then at the end, you see the egg, which is the egg is symbolic of the sun. It's symbolic of the sun. And you see this serpent chasing this egg, which and you go into ancient Egyptian spirituality, you see Apep chasing Ra. This is what it is, the sun and is and Apep is in this eternal battle. And when you go into the Viking, you find Thor, which is Hor, and he's at war with the Midgard serpent. It's the same story. It is the same story. We're not getting away from that, And so you can see this concept all the way in the serpent and the egg, and the egg being the sun, trying to swallow the sun. But Ra was victorious. Every morning he rose again, he was victorious. And so you see here the Ark of Ra, and you see Ra there, the sun, you see the sun, and you see the serpent. Now, in this particular, it's and that's symbolic of frequency and energy too. It's symbolic of frequency and energy. And so, these concepts is very deep scientifically, spiritually. And so you have to interpret it on more than one level. Now, uh This is crazy right here. And you see the pharaoh, you see the pineal gland that the cobra is sitting on the pine. That's a cobra. That's a cobra. That ain't just a serpent. And you see here where the cobra, and I don't know, there ain't no cobras in America. I don't think there's no cobras in America. I think they just in Africa and Asia. But you see right there, the serpent is on the mind head, and he trying to symbolically represent, what, and because that's just what it is. They're just like a lot of people. They mimic African Americans today. I mean, African Black American, however you want to do it, you want to say it. And so, the traditions had got back. They had gotten around. They was very familiar with certain aspects of ancient Egypt all over the world, and they would try to mimic the things that we were doing in Africa. They were trying to because the Pharaoh was it was literally the most powerful man on the planet. Not just in Africa, he was the most powerful man on the planet. No one could bring forth the type of when you talk about King Tut and no other man on the planet had riches like that. And then you think about what's crazy. People look at the one tomb that King Tut and all that gold and all them, them artifacts. And he wasn't even the richest king that ever lived. And you talking about something like, on the at Abydos, it was 76 kings on the kings list, and that was great kings. It was more than that, but those were the only 76 kings that qualified to be called one of the great ones. And so King Tut, he was a boy king, what little wealth he had, he inherited. He didn't build it up. And so imagine if he was a boy king and most of his wealth he inherited. What the hell did kings like Ramesses II and Amenhotep the third and all these which were far more powerful than King Tut? What did they have in their tomb? And and the one thing that King Tut showed us that they went down, man, like very exquisite. So when we begin to imagine all these kings, we see the tombs. So we know that they no nothing close to ever. You could compile damn near all the other civilizations on the planet together, and they were pale in comparison to anything that we could imagine that came out of the Nile Valley. You can put all the rest of the world together and compile the best of every fucking thing they got, and it still would pale in comparison to everything that came out the Nile. And Africa would the whole continent would be too much. That would be unfair. I'm just gonna say the Nile Valley, and that's the three civilizations: Egypt, Nubia, and Aksum, which is today modern Ethiopia. Ain't no damn, it's nothing you could put together and you imagine the pristine form and all the temples is there. It just, this is heaven on earth. Egypt was heaven on earth. It was a reflection of heaven on earth, and it including Nubia. I also include Nubia and also include Oxa. So when you start talking about Kemet and the Olmecs and the mysterious connection that they don't want to teach you is the fact that our people was a global power, and we got to learn that we can't be myopic. We can't be hiding in no corner, and no, we got to look at our divinity. We got to look at how did we master this planet? How did we put our peoples put in the thing is about it, just like we practice the chakra system, and we understand that we got different, chakras in our body in line to our spinal cord, from your brain, top of your head, all the way down to to your sacral, you know what I'm saying? But the earth is the same way. The earth is the same way with the equator being the spine of the earth. And this is where the hottest part of the earth is. And do you know the majority of the ancient civilizations is off that equator, which is the spine. So these civilizations act like the chakras of the planet. They intentionally put these civilizations in places where there's vortexes, there's energy. Imagine, man, we get stones that put on our hand, different stones that go on our chest, and we wear them in necklaces and shit. But imagine being, all near a mine full of amethyst and all the onyx and all the different stones and shit. You got just miles deep full of these different precious minerals and the energy that the sun is hitting around this area. And you imagine a necklace activating or a ring activating. Imagine the energy that's coming up out of the earth with all these minerals and especially around the equator. So it's not no coincidence that in these areas, especially in the early part of humanity, that this is where a majority of the great civilizations, especially the ones that was manifested and then it moved in different directions. But these was the primary areas. These equator, these tropical civilizations are some of the main chakras on this planet, and that these civilizations are put in the particular areas that they are because of the fact that these are chakra centers of the earth, and they are also aligned to celestial chakras, which is these constellations, because they are energy down on the planet. That's why they put, the great, netters up there so that they would know. They know the energy that's coming from them constellations. And so we had to master all of it, synchronize the celestial, the planetary, and ourselves, in that. We had to align it with all these cosmic energies. But anyway, family, uh, I guess I'm done for the twilight hour, but I will return real soon. Just stay tuned, family. Get over to Patreon. Don't miss nothing. Click that link in the top of the chat, and I'll see y'all a little later on. Black Power.